Welcome, my dear audience and friends, to another episode of Cancer Convos with Grace B. This is your host, Grace B, coming to you from New York City, the city that never sleeps and is home to Cancer Convos with Grace B. As we always hop on the show, don't forget to do your medical checks because until there's a cure, prevention is the cure. So, our focus in this is lung cancer. And before we begin, do allow me reel off some very scary stats. Number one, it is the leading cause of cancer deaths worldwide. Number two, an estimated about 280,000 people will be diagnosed with lung cancer in 2023 in the United States. Number three, do you know that 1 in 16 people will be diagnosed with lung cancer in their lifetime? That is 1 in 16 in men and 1 in 17 in women. And also, approximately 127,000 American lives are lost annually to lung cancer. And then the last is that about 650,000 people in the US today will have been diagnosed with lung cancer at some point in their lives. These are very, very scary stats, and that is why we have the pleasure and privilege of hosting an amazing guest to educate us more about this very terrible disease. He is the director of STEM Workforce Initiatives at Longevity, which is an amazing foundation doing phenomenal work in the lung cancer arena. He is very passionate and dedicated about equity in lung cancer research, health equity and disparities as well, and information about screening for various types of cancers. His far-reaching accomplishments in STEM mentoring knows no bounds, honestly. Therefore, without much ado, allow me welcome Dr. Eugene Manley to the show. We are
Oh,
incredibly delighted to have you on, Eugene. Thank you so much for coming on.
oh, thank you, Grace, for inviting me. Now you oversold me. My goodness.
No, you're
So
worth
honored.
it.
I'm so honored to be on the show, and I'm very happy to talk about lung cancer disparities and what people can learn about the disease and what we can do to increase survival.
Thank you so much. So, before we dive into this very crucial conversation, um, I'm sure my audience would like to know what your motivation was to opt for a career in medicine.
Actually, it started, maybe back when I was a kid. Because when I was a kid, I was a chronic asthmatic. I mean, I would be in the hospital 20 to 30 times a year just for my asthma until I was about 10 years old.
Oh,
So I
wow.
I got used to needles and IVs, and I think I was like a revolving door with the hospital. And I still have the asthma, but it's under control now. I'm really just on
Okay.
Advair, so it's more stable. But it's a miracle I got through that, and I don't know what made me calm down, but that was sort of just seeing medical professionals and how they worked and helped people. I always wanted to sort of figure out how the body worked, how you could repair it, and so that sort of was the initial start of me thinking about a career in medicine.
Oh, wonderful. I'm so sorry about the asthma, but it's good to know that you have it under control right now.
Yes, it's tough. I mean, I feel for anyone that's really suffering from chronic asthma now because I went through it as a kid, and it is no joke.
Please enlighten us about the mission and vision of longevity, please.
The mission of longevity is to really make an impact on increasing the quality of life and survivorship of all people diagnosed with lung cancer. And this is in part through accelerating research into early detection and more effective treatments, as well as providing community support and educational materials for all of those affected by the disease.
Oh, wonderful. And so, as director of STEM workforce initiatives, how are you raising awareness and access to care for minority populations and improving the outcomes for Black patients in the lung cancer continuum?
I'm doing this through several ways. One of the first is I work with some external community partners. In 2020, we had convened a group called Project Radical, which is by acronym Racial Disparities in Cancer of the Lung. And
Mm-hmm.
we, over a 3 year period, I think I was part of the last year and a half or so, we came together and there were different groups of patients, caregivers, researchers, clinicians that really were passionate about increasing awareness about lung cancer disparities and outcomes in Black communities. And last year, or was it the year? I think it was the year before, we did a 5 webinar series during Lung Cancer Awareness Month about the whole the continuum of care for Black patients experiencing lung cancer. I also do a lot of speaking on panels about lung cancer disparities in African Americans, the differences in rates between Black and white patients, the
Mm-hmm.
inequalities in access to biomarker testing, and the low rates of clinical trial participants in immunotherapies of Black patients. And I also then do, periodically I get asked to speak to family physician groups or church groups. So I try to bring as much information out to people as I can.
Wonderful. And what has the response been from the populations you've been, talking to?
It's been great because a lot of times they don't even know a lot of this information.
Mm-hmm.
They hardly ever get to see anyone that looks like them that can give them this information in a factual manner. And then they really appreciate it because it's just so much misinformation or lack of information out there, and just really making sure they understand that they can self-advocate, that they can find resources, and that there are patient groups that can help them.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's fantastic. That's wonderful work you're doing. I know that in our very first meeting, you had shared your passion for increasing representation in the lung cancer research space. And so, what steps are you taking right now, especially with this platform that you have, to ensure that this is realized?
Um, when the biggest thing that I have worked on is our minority mentorship and training program, which just launched this past November, and it is for
Okay.
our health. As far as health equity and inclusiveness research grant awardees. So these are postdocs and clinical fellows, excuse me, or early career clinician scientists that are from underserved, underrepresented communities that are dedicated to giving back to their communities. And really, the goal of the program, it's an add-on to their health equity grant, and
Hmm.
it's designed to be multi-layered to give them experience and exposure to grant writing and thoracic oncology, but embedding health equity in it. So that means they get to really learn about biostats, clinical trials, and as they do their work or look at other work, make sure that marginalized populations aren't excluded because there were only 10 in this set. Well, then make sure there's more.
Hmm.
And they get a set of ancillary courses that cover various aspects of professional life, career, and professional development, because often they do not um, know or have these skills. So like most of the time they come in, don't know you need to know about retirement accounts. They don't know about wills and living trusts. So we can provide some of these skills that as they come out, they're more prepared to go professionally, then we've accomplished a goal. And then we have multiple layers of external mentoring. So they have a senior professor that works with them on a grant. They have a more regular mentor they meet with monthly, bi-monthly. Then they meet with me quarterly, and that's really because often when you get a grant, you only hear from the agency when your annual report is due, but that
Hmm.
doesn't tell you if they're doing well in the lab, if they're being treated with respect, if they're being marginalized. And they're afraid to always report things that are not happening correctly because they're
Hmm.
afraid of losing the funding. So then they're still trapped in a place. So we're trying to mitigate all of that. And then we give them exposure to alternative career paths at our in-person session that also occurs once a year. So where they can learn from people that are in 2 or 3 different areas and how they leverage their skills to transition out of academia. And so while we would love them to stay in thoracic, which has 2 purposes, more upstream, it's then they can advocate for more people doing health equity research. They can advocate for more underrepresented scholars. They can advocate for those for more under-resourced or less published institutions. And then
Mhm.
downstream, if we get more in the workforce, we can increase workforce diversity. But that also
Mhm.
then means patients are more likely to get a better standard of care and receive less bias and also be more aware of clinical trials. But if they do not decide they want to stay in medicine, because we have a lot of things always going in the backgrounds of our lives, and they may just have to leave medicine. We still want them to have the tools and skills to go to any professional career path. So we really have an encompassing program that's not just training, but also nurturing and trying to make sure they succeed.
Wow, this is a one-stop shop, you know. It's like just going back to university just for this. And it's, as you rightly said, it's all encompassing, giving them that, you know, what should I say, a guide or a roadmap as to how to venture if they decide to stay in research, or they decide to move and do any other thing. That's fantastic. And especially knowing that you know, for what they're doing as Black and minorities in research, they're also looking out for people that look like them. And the issue of mistrust now is now mitigated in the sense that, you know, they see someone that's looking out for them, who is in research, who understands where they're coming from. And so that issue of mistrust or fear actually could be, you know, nipped in the bud. So that's fantastic what you're doing, honestly. It's
Oh, thank you.
wonderful.
That really, really was passionate about it. And I've seen so many scholars like me and my friends that are MDs and PhDs that have just faced many barriers, and
Hmm.
how can we correct them? So I really built this program to mitigate many of those pinch points that hinder career advancement.
Wonderful. Honestly, it's applaudable. Thank you so much for what you're doing.
Thank you.
Now, the groups that you address, you know, because like we had discussed the last time, about addressing these, you know, diseases, especially in low income communities. How do they see this? How do they accept this?
Um, well,
Mm.
the low income communities, they
Excuse me.
often don't see a lot of the research or the outcomes because we still aren't as present in the communities as needed.
Hmm.
Often, when you're low income, you often get your, treatment, your diagnosis late. Often your symptoms are disregarded until it's last minute, and often Black patients
Hmm.
are at earlier stages with a slower smoking history, and then it's usually more advanced. And
Hmm.
so there's this whole, fear of, paying bills, fear
Hmm.
of, failing your family. There's this fatalism, and then it's like, well, maybe I deserve to get it. But then you combine this on top of the systemic and structural racism they're already facing, then that can lead to some more depression. And then it's just, when they're already told that sometimes they're told they're not good enough, and then it's just really weighs them down, and it's really boggling. And so really we have to try to uplift the patients and let them know
Hmm.
that anyone with lungs can get lung cancer. There are a lot of campaigns in the 80s that just tried to demonize
Hmm.
smoking and make people look like they were less than human.
Yeah.
And while yes, smoking is one of the leading risk factors, it is not the sole and only factor. There's radon, air pollution, indoor cooking modules, there's environmental exposures, there's job exposures. So there's a whole set of people now that have lung cancer that are do not smoke. And then what are we doing for those? And that's the much harder and bigger, more pressing question.
Absolutely. It's good to let them know that it's not until you're a smoker before you have lung cancer. You know, we're discussing. I have my friend's wife, my childhood friend's wife, is actually she just had one lung removed, and she's never smoked. But she grew up. You know, she has a background of building in her family, and she had followed like older brothers and uncles to sites where asbestos was being used. So this kind of, propagated the whole thing to where she is now. And so yes, it's good for them to know that, that it is not just being a smoker that brings about this crazy disease, honestly. And it's good you're letting them know that. And I wanted to ask also, because them thinking that it's because they're smokers, even if they are, there's the issue of stigma. So how do you try to eliminate that word when they're seeking help, of being advocates for themselves?
It's one of the more pressing issues. So, um, from the more clinical side, they're working to try to use less stigmatizing language.
Mm-hmm.
Trying to use more patient-specific language, but there's still ways that you have to think about how each community responds to this inclusive language. So maybe saying something stigmatizing to one group maybe won't be stigmatizing to Hispanics, or it won't be stigmatizing to Asians. So you have to really more so think about what each group specifically will consider stigmatized, and then work around that to find ways to communicate. As you could talk to some inner city kids, and you may get the answer you want, but you may have to use different wording just to get they smoke cigarettes. They may call it something else, or some side name, and you have to you know use some deductive reason to get the terms that they will work with to give you your answers.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one of the things, but also just telling the patient, you are not a failure. It's not your fault, and that there are a lot of resources and information available now. And in the last 15 years, we've had
Mm-hmm.
this rapid acceleration in development of targeted therapies. We're now up
Mm-hmm.
to 10 targeted therapies plus. Well, there's 10 targeted therapies for lung cancer, where some of them have multiple treatments. So now we're able to extend lives way better than they could in the 90s, when they used to only could give you chemo and radiation. So it's now we have to make sure patients know that when you have a test, you have to push hard if it's not covered to get non next gen sequencing, which will cover the 10 biomarkers. If you only get 3, you may not know of a target that you could have a therapy for.
Yes. And also for them to know about the symptoms, because somebody could just be coughing and they'll just say, oh, it's just a minor cough. But letting them know that those are little things to look out for. Not little things, but big things. But, they kind of grow until it's too late to even, seek help or go for a trial or something like that. So the awareness has to be ongoing for them to know, if you feel something, say something. If you see something, say something, or go for second, third, or even fourth opinions, since it's not until you're a smoker or whatever that you have these things. It's everybody's getting it. And as you rightly said, as long as you have lungs, you're susceptible to lung cancer. So, oh, that's wonderful. Thank you so much. So, from your perspective, what are the barriers and challenges of um, having a cancer screening? I mean, lung cancer screening. How do you put this across to them, and how do you address these?
Well, lung cancer screening, ironically, is a newer screening that has really been developed since roughly 2012-ish.
Hmm.
So before then, we didn't have real screening guidelines. And the U.S. Preventative Services Task Force,
Hmm.
there were 2 studies that showed that um, screening for those with lung cancer was much more effective at picking it up in those that had a history of smoking. And so they had some initial guidelines that I can't remember the guidelines right off the top of my head, but something like you had to be 60 to 80, and it was a 30 pack year smoking history, and have or had to be currently or have had a history of smoking.
Hmm.
And that was able to show, and if you look in a subset of the data, it significantly showed that you could do a stage shift. So you could literally detect lung cancer at a one stage earlier in patients that smoke with just screening.
Mm-hmm.
And then recently they just updated the U.S. Preventive Services Task Force recommendations to, I believe it's 50 to 80 years of age,
Oh, really?
a 20 pack year smoking history, and then as current smoker have quit smoking within the last 15 years. So this has increased the number of minorities and women that are able to be screened. That
Aha.
being said, right now, roughly only 6% of people that are eligible for lung cancer screening are getting screened. And
Mm-hmm.
if you compare that to things like breast, colon, and prostate, they're way higher. So we still have a lot of ways to go. And hopefully we can catch up. But we're now up to 6%. And there's still issues with getting insurances to know it can be covered. Patients don't know it can be covered. Some primary care don't know it can be covered. And so we're still in that trying to increase education and awareness phase.
Mm-hmm.
And while the screening is great for those that have this history of smoking, it still misses those that don't have a history, and so we still don't have a effective way to early detect for those.
Okay, all right. So, but um, basically, if you're between 50 and 80 and you've been smoking like 20 a day, you're eligible to go for the screening, basically.
Yes. Yep.
Okay, just
Or,
just for people to know that.
or
Yeah.
if you have quit, or if you're a
Or
current
if you
smoker
have
have quit,
quit, for example, you have quit now for over
in
15
the
years,
or
right?
within the last 15 years.
The last 15 years. Okay, so that allows you some coverage. Maybe
Yes.
insurance can take care of that. Okay, that's good to know. That's something that I'm sure people would be interested in knowing, because we know that some people may feel or think that there's something wrong, but when they think about, okay, am I going to be covered even if I want to attack it? Will my insurance cover it? And even if my insurance doesn't cover it, I don't have the deep pockets. I don't have a Cadillac insurance, nothing. So, they're left to just pray. Let's put it that way.
Yes.
There's nothing to do after that except um, they fall under these categories, I believe. Yeah,
And that's quite a challenge. It is quite a challenge.
I can imagine that. I know, I know, I know. Oh, wow. So we're coming to the end of this. With all that you do and you're all over the place. I mean, it took me quite a while to track you down for today. Um, so how do you, with all that you do, how do you unwind?
What is that word? I don't know what that word means.
You have to, otherwise you don't want burnout. You have to.
If you had caught me in a former life pre-COVID when I would go out a lot, you
Hmm.
probably catch me doing karaoke, but I am admitting nothing. I'm
Hmm.
admitting nothing about what I would sing. We're just gonna leave it at I would sing karaoke.
One day we should sing karaoke. I love karaoke too. So I'm hoping that we'll be able to do that one of these days when we actually meet, right? So
But
the fun
yeah,
thing about you, you love to sing, right?
yes.
Okay. All right. So to that one person that is watching us right now and who is thinking, okay, I'm having some crazy symptoms. I don't know what to do about it. I don't know if I should tackle it. They're confused. What word of advice would you have for them now?
I guess it's a couple of things. One, if you really feel out of sorts, keep pushing to get something diagnosed. Lung cancer is tricky because often the symptoms can mask as other things. Sometimes it can be thought of as pneumonia. Sometimes it can be thought of as a persistent cough. Sometimes it can manifest as just a pain in the shoulder or the back, or it could be shortness of breath. It could be very prolonged. So
Hmm.
it can be masked as many things, and often it's caught when it's more advanced because it's
Hmm.
so hard to detect early. But if you suspect you have it or have any risk factors, then just keep advocating. If you think you have symptoms or you have a diagnosis, you don't know where to start. If you get biomarker testing and you have a specific marker like EGFR or ALK or KRAS, there are specific patient groups for those biomarkers.
Mm-hmm.
There's EGFR resistors, ALK, Ross wonders, and I'm their other name, ALK positive, and there's different other groups for each of the mutations. I would also say we have a bunch of freely downloadable resources on the longevity website,
Okay.
www.longevity.org. And we have
Yes.
in the navigating your diagnosis section in lung cancer 101, and we have a bunch
Mm-hmm.
of material that's been vetted by our patient awareness committee, and it has information about, navigating your diagnosis, what are the tests, what kind of treatments there are, what kind of follow-up. So we have all these information and resources freely downloadable. And just recently, we also launched a Facebook group called Reach, and that's a group for Black patients with patients
R
and
E
caregivers.
A REACH
Yes, and it's Reach
on
for
Facebook.
Yep, it's a Facebook group just launched recently for Black patients and caregivers.
Okay.
And they are starting to organize different events. So it's virtual, and they'll have different sessions so people can come on and chat and learn about the disease from people that look like
Okay.
them.
That's fantastic. I'm going to check that out. And I have a couple of friends who have had lung cancer. Since you said it's just been, started, I'm going to be putting this in the show notes, and I'm also um, ask them to check it out, being that it's primarily focused on Black brothers and sisters and their
Yes,
caregivers.
yes,
I'll
yes.
I'll 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 be sharing that. Yeah. So before I let you go, could you share your social handles, please?
I have a Twitter which is at Eugene Manley, and
Okay.
then I think LinkedIn it's Eugene Manley Jr.
Yes. Okay. That I know. Right.
Because you stalked me.
You know, before I bring my guests on, I have to, but it was our mutual friend that said you have to talk to
It was
Eugene.
Pam. It was Pam.
Yeah, it was Pam. Yes, you have to talk
So,
to
so
Eugene.
Pam, that's your shout out.
Yeah, Pam, a rare patient voice. Thank you so much for the kind gesture. So, it's been wonderful talking to you. It's been a fast one, but I'm going to be bringing you again, and we'll be discussing something else, but I won't tell
Awesome.
you what yet.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. I'm always happy to talk, and I hope this information is useful for people and that they feel they can get something out of this and learn and just learn to keep self advocating and pushing for the treatments you deserve.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that reminder. And before I sign you out, let me talk to the audience. So, my dear audience and friends, there you have it. You've been listening to my amazing guest, Eugene Manley, who is a big guy, top hierarchy in longevity, a nonprofit foundation that's doing absolute phenomenal work in lung cancer and lung cancer research. This has been one program that, has been able to look out for lung cancer patients and their caregivers. Please check out the longevity website where you'll get lots of information and resources to be able to guide you if you think you may be diagnosed with something like this. So until the next episode, I say don't forget to do your medical checks because until there's a cure, prevention is the cure. God bless you all and ciao, ciao. Bye-bye
Good
now.
night.